Hi, everyone. It's so nice to have you back. Welcome to another edition of Soundbites of Immigration Success. My name is Monica O'Brien. I am Manager of Education and Stakeholder Engagement at CAPIC. And we bring this podcast series to you so you can get to know your fellow colleagues, find out some of their challenges and successes, and to hear a little bit of their advice. I have with me today Scott Smith. Hello, Scott.
Hey, Monica. Pleasure to be here.
Nice to see you. So, Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you decide to become an immigration consultant?
Yeah, I've been an immigration consultant since 2008. I got into the business because I was already doing visas for people who were traveling outside of Canada. So imagine a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. We even had some international students and workers who were looking to travel outside Canada and who required Russian visas, Chinese visas, Brazilian visas. So I was working in a visa company at the time, finishing up my university, my first round of studies, and then at one point we had a family that was looking to get visitor visas to come back into Canada, and so I thought, well, I've got the expertise. I've been putting these application forms together and all these supporting documents and tying them all into nice FedEx envelopes and dealing with embassies and consulates. And I thought, well, I'll take a crack at this process. So I prepared visitor visa applications and sent passports to, back then you just sent the application to, back then it was New York, I guess. And I got a phone call from a visa officer a few days later saying, "Hey, it looks like you're doing this for a fee, and as of 2002, you're not permitted to be doing this unless you're a licensed consultant. So I suggest you go and get your license." And so that's what I did. I took the visa officer's advice, and I promptly registered at Humber College, and I got my certificate, and I got my license shortly thereafter. So that's kind of how I got into the profession. But I've always had an interest in the international domain. I spent a lot of time in West Africa growing up, and so I was always interested in people who were on the move, and meeting all kinds of characters in Nigeria, where I was with my dad, and yeah, I just felt really comfortable dealing with foreign nationals, and that sort of drove my passion to becoming an immigration consultant. And then my education, I was a student of political science, and I still am. I just finished my PhD back in June of this year, of 2023. Just graduated from McMaster University and earned my doctorate in political science. So I still have very much an interest in politics and global politics, especially. And I feel like this profession kind of really gels in that space.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And congratulations, by the way, on your PhD. It's quite an accomplishment. I know that it was a journey. It took you a while, but it's nice that you made it to the other side. What I found really, really interesting about your story there was the fact that you were already helping people from other countries go to other countries. Yet when you decided to submit a TRV application to New York, you weren't really aware yourself that immigration consulting for a fee was a regulated profession.
Yeah, exactly. I just thought it was pretty standard procedure. You prepare an application. I didn't think you had to have and some embassies did have like a form you had to fill out that authorized you to, conduct business on the client's behalf, pick up a passport or drop it off or whatever. But yeah, it was news to me. I did fill in the 5476 at the time, if that was even what it was called. And that's when the officer, that's when they knew who I was because I'd indicated my information. So they reached out to me with that form. But yeah, I didn't go deeper than that. I didn't realize that you needed to be licensed, and to do that kind of work. So it was a bit of a wake up call. But yeah, it was for the good. It sort of set me on my
Set you
career
on your path.
path.
And
Yeah.
do you happen to know, you don't have to disclose it, but do you happen to remember the visa officer's name? Because I want to say a big thank you to them.
I no, I don't remember her name, and I know it was a female. I can't remember. But in the years that followed, before a lot of online stuff started taking over, you could develop relationships with officers, and I did develop, fairly good relationships with staff in Detroit and Buffalo and New York, Detroit especially. And I used to call even. I mean, back then, I mean, it seemed to be a bit easier where even if I in some cases I had, students who were out of status and beyond 90 days. And, we made a petition and, we provided a, fairly persuasive case. And in some of the cases, the visas were issued nevertheless. And I feel those days are gone. But I mean, that does, of course, speak to the discretion of these officers to exercise their discretionary authority. But certainly, yeah, those were the days. And I think the environment, especially for our new practitioners, has changed quite dramatically, that they wouldn't really recognize that era of representation where you could simply pick up the phone and call someone in the visa section.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing your entry to the profession. And I know when we last spoke outside of our podcast, I had it in my mind that you'd only been around 6 or 7 years, and you said, no, Monica, it's about 15 years. So time flies. So you were speaking about some of the challenges, and you spoke, one of them is being the difficulty in getting a hold of people. But for you, what has been maybe the biggest challenge for you as an immigration consultant, and how are you tackling it? Or maybe you've solved that challenge.
Well, I think like any professional, I mean, there comes a point where you need to decide what you're going to do, and oftentimes I've been presented with different opportunities, and in the education space and the teaching space, I really enjoy teaching. I enjoy sharing knowledge. I enjoy mentoring, and these are all activities and passions that take time and take resources and commitment. And growing a practice alongside these other pursuits can be really it can be difficult. It can be taxing. It can be exhausting. And so I think my main difficulty as an independent person, and as someone who is a licensed professional, and I have my own sort of vision of what I want iHeart Canada to be. And it's really, I guess, in bringing on board like-minded people to grow the business. That's my primary challenge. Many of us are, sole practitioners, and we operate fairly independently. And it's really only when we need something that we kind of come into contact with our peers and our colleagues. And of course, getting information, sharing resources. But I think that's my main challenge is how to effectively grow my practice while maintaining what I believe are high ethical and, sort of other standards. It's an issue of trust, I think, Monica. It's for someone and I'm very independently minded. I've always been sort of, the master of my own sort of domain. And there's a limit to professional practice if you go it alone. So I found that, maybe in anticipation of your follow-up question, I found that, networking, I found that seeking out peers who are kind of at my level or a little bit higher than my level, and people that I can learn from, helps me envision what I want my practice to become. It helps me bring in resources that I may otherwise be unable to muster for myself.
Yeah. And so sort of further from that, like you talked about, I mean, you love teaching, you love sharing, but you also want to grow your practice. So maybe another challenge is sort of marrying all those interests that you have and how you can make it work, right? And figuring out what is the biggest priority for you.
Yeah. And I think it's got to be doing what you love, and not pursuing something for necessarily an end goal. I mean, the goalposts can change. I mean, they shift, and but I think doing things you love will bring you to your goal. And so I've been trying to just focus on doing things that I really enjoy. But things that I enjoy doing a lot of things, Monica. I like I said, I enjoy researching, I enjoy teaching, I enjoy doing, consulting my clients, and I'm the type of practitioner who wants to be involved at every stage of the process. And for me, the biggest value added, I think, in the immigration consulting profession is taking an hour or two and sitting with a client and understanding their immigration goals, their dreams for studying, working, and living in Canada, and coming up with not just an immigration strategy, but a strategy that looks, beyond, and that really considers like an immigration life cycle, but also, labor market readiness. How do we actually prepare, our future permanent residents and citizens? And that's a role I take very seriously. I have a respect for our institutions, for our code of conduct. And so I think, and that sort of sets you up to practice in a certain way. And it means that you don't burn through files. You spend time, you spend hours on a file, you spend time. And so, there's only limited time. You can't fit too many things into one day, because in the end, I mean, we work to live. We don't live to work. And so we have to balance our work with all kinds of other things, family, friends, sports, other activities, which I think are obviously super important.
Yeah, well, you've mirrored some of your comments have mirrored what others have said, that how as practitioners we have an obligation, like what we do is a privilege, but we also have an obligation to do what we do well, and that we can impact lives, and as one person said, a generation, and as you said it, future permanent residents. So I agree with you that it's something that we have to take seriously, but we have to look after ourselves first, right? We have to be healthy and whole in all aspects so that we can represent our clients well. So Scott, now that you've introduced yourself and you've told us sort of the conundrums that you face and your challenges, if you were doing this all over again and you're starting out again prior to 2008, what do you wish you had known then? What would you tell the young Scott?
We had a sort of a fireside chat one year at CAPIC, one of the CAPIC events, and Kim Lee and Phil Mooney and myself and a couple of other people. And the topic of conversation, I'm not sure if you remember this, was passion, purpose, and profit. And how are these three elements related? As a young consultant, I mean, I was full of, dreams. I had all these idealistic visions. I didn't really invest a lot of time in knowing how to build the business side of my practice. And I think that's really key these days. I think that, you have people coming into the profession for different reasons. I mean, some just want to make money, but others are following a vocation, and they're following, a path. And I think it's important that you put your passion into perspective, and you actually invest. And I wish I would have invested more time in learning how to grow a business, right? Just fundamental accounting, fundamental principles in growing a business, which I largely took for granted, that I could make money and outsource all this stuff to professionals. And so I wish that I had taken more time. And it's never too late. I mean, I'm still solvent and I still have my license, and so I can always learn, and I can always grow these tools. But that's the advice I would give to early practitioners, in addition to just getting yourself out there and developing your networks, your knowledge networks, communities of fellow practitioners and colleagues that you can lean on, and that you could build your confidence. And the story that I hear from new consultants, and I'm sure you've heard this as well, is a story of just a lack of confidence and a lack of trust in their abilities to pursue work and to take on files. And it's a very crippling and debilitating thing, but it's so natural, and it's so, it's all too human to think that, no, we're not necessarily smart enough, or we don't necessarily have enough experience to take on this really complex matter. The truth is that, you do have to put yourself out there. You rely on your peers and your colleagues to help you get through some of the difficult questions. And so I really would advise, the newer RCICs out there to develop these networks, because as a profession, I think this is something that's lacking. I know the college, came out with a mentorship program as part of its mandate, but on the sort of professional development side, I think we need to invest in a real sort of community where we can rely on mentors to help guide our practice. So yeah, I think building those skills and those networks are absolutely key, and that's what I've told myself, a much younger Scott.
Well, Scott, I like how you put your passion in perspective. And I want to say, you took one step forward by joining CAPIC and being a member of CAPIC, and certainly developing strong networks there. I know we've all really relied on each other. I wanted to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
Would you do it all over again? Would you do it all over again?
Yeah, it's a good question, Monica, because I would. And the reason why I would is I think that it's fed other passions in my life. I mean, it gave me the determination to, finish my doctorate. It really helped inform some of the stuff that appeared in my academic work. And so I think it helped me in many ways. And so, yes, I have no regrets at all. In launching this profession, and I continue. I mean, I hope to continue working as a consultant, as an RCIC, for many years to come. And how I end up marrying that profession with my academic pursuits remains in question. But I certainly wouldn't dream of letting go of my license, because it does add tremendous value to my professional profile, for sure.
Well, Scott, I want to thank you for taking your time and your honesty, and you've been so authentic. And just a reminder for those listening that, your path may not always be straight. And like Scott's, you may launch from being a consultant to pursuing academic teaching. But as long as you keep that passion and keep it in perspective, and you'll get to those goalposts, as Scott says. So Scott, thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Monica. It was a pleasure to join you in our community. So thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure. We'll see you at the next one. Thank you so much.
Let's go see you in Halifax.